Hi there,
So,
Tim. Thanks so much for joining us today on Chester Lives. Of course, you're so well known in Chester, but just for the benefit of the people watching, I wondered if you'd talk a little bit about your story.
my story. Where do you want to start? Where do you want to start? A once upon a time scenario, Lisa, and a rather surprising question. I suppose the context of the story is that I with my business partner Howard Moore founded Kenny Moore Commercial Property Consultants 25 years ago.
So there's been obvious challenges for the commercial sector, hasn't there? As well as all sectors, it's affected us in all different ways. But how do you feel the new announcement of the planning announcements is going to impact the commercial?
Okay, so what you're talking about there is the proposed installation of a new use classes order coming into
from September, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. I personally think it's been long overdue. The probability is that we don't, but we might. And if we do, you're back into a stodgy, inflexible process.
Yes.
It's inevitably, there's not going to be any dispute about it. It's just a very sensible use of this building. But you're back into process stifling again. So it would be lovely to think that we could have an environment where you can make some common sense decisions. The only problem with common sense is that, as we all know, common sense isn't as common as it should be.
No.
More coffee.
More coffee. Well, it's the hope is that it will help the recovery of the high streets, but I think you're right. Whether or not it will do it as quickly as we need it is another question. You've been very involved, Tim, on commenting and helping with the people understanding where we're at with Northgate. Do you mind giving a quick update on where we are at this moment with phase one Northgate?
Insofar as I understand it to be, and bear in mind that I'm not part of the development team, the comments that you refer to there are largely historic. And I suppose if I take the DNA of what I was just talking about, inflexibility of decisions based on historic, where we used to be, and not being able to change fast enough, that was really what sat behind me ending up leading a bit of a campaign to persuade the development team who are responsible for the Northgate project that they were out of step with where they should have been. And it's a shame that really it took a significant private sector involvement to do that, but it did. And I'm very grateful that the team at the council actually eventually sat up and listened. And that I take no pride in being proved right. To me, it was just common sense. But again, sometimes that's not as common as it should be. But we persuaded the team to actually stop and think and review. And so now we've got a scenario where the first phase of the Northgate project is being pressed ahead with. Now, that's not going to get unanimous approval from every sector of the community. But in my mind, it's to be massively applauded. Phase one will be the thick end of 800 space car park, multi-storey car park, right on the ring road, so accessible right where it needs to be. It will be, so the council team tell us, and it has to be this way. It will be the most accessible, the best, the most secure, CCTV, electric charging points, bookable spaces, everything you want a modern car park to be, right where you need it to be. Right. So that car park will be in itself an anchor, because at the moment we've got lots of little sort of car parks sprinkled through the city. So that in itself will be the biggest car park. It will become the place that you park. And that means that as an anchor, it does a job. People traditionally don't think of car parks as anchors, but they should and they do. Just look at Warrington. So Warrington built themselves a brand new multi-storey car park as a phase one of their own town centre development. And within days of finishing this car park, the rest of the site was a building site, but in days of finishing the car park, it was running at sort of 40-odd% occupancy. And so it just shows that if you do get it right, it will anchor the city. And anchoring the city there as a car park will become a hub. So it'll be a transport and accessibility hub to fund the market or to fill the market next door to it. Multi-screen cinema on the top of it. It's right next door to Story House. And let's not forget, Story House doesn't have its own car park. An open civic square and half a dozen units. Now, what those half a dozen units will end up being, Lisa, goodness knows. There's pre-let deals signed, but as we found out in the last few months, that it's often not worth the paper they're written on because the companies they're signed with won't be here. But if you take the long-term view, which you have to do when you're dealing with a city centre, you've got to take some very bold, very brave decisions, and I commend the council for doing this. It loses money. It loses a lot of money. But as a pump priming exercise for the city, if we don't actually collaboratively stick a blooming big flag on this and go, come on guys, we're Chester. This is what we do, right? To me, it's absolutely the right thing to be doing. But it's phase one. So the phase two of the site, which is the existing forum centre, a lot of the existing buildings around the office buildings and so forth, most of those are now owned by the council. They've acquired them under compulsory purchase powers. You know, well, that is where the next challenge has to be. And if we step back further still from this, and we need to ask the question, what is Chester? Well, I was out with a mate of mine yesterday, and you know, he's an electrical contractor, an engineer, just my dive buddy. Well, he's especially my dive buddy in that sense, but he's a dive buddy. But he's not a property person. And, you know, and he just said, you know, Chester is fantastic. Just think what we've got. How many Roman amphitheatres outside Rome are there? How many walled cities are there? We've got the river. We've got all these fantastic things, but we just take them for granted. And we're not standing far back enough for it, actually creating the Chester brand and all coming, come on, guys, it's Chester. We're better than this, right? We should have a Chester test. We should all be looking at how we can create a Chester community, because slowly and individually, we've got lots of little developers converting office space to moribund office space, I have to say, back into residential. So you've got people living in the city centre, and that's across all spectrums. This is not a conversation about student housing. Student accommodation serves the university, and I don't think anyone's expecting university numbers to grow in the next few years. So you know, that's probably a market that's plateaued. But we've got an increasingly ageing community. But we don't want to fill Chester with grey hairs such as mine, because we're not big spenders. So we have to be talking about these conversations about community. We've got to be engaging with particularly younger people, enthusiastic, bright, intelligent, switched on, keen, Chester-loving people that want to live in the city centre, work in the city centre, spend money in the city centre. And this is really important. Take pride in the city. I'm afraid if you walk through the city, it doesn't present very well. No. It doesn't present very well. You know, we don't have to go very far before issues of homelessness come up as the #1 issue on a lot of the traders' forums. That in itself is a whole conversation. But you know, really, a Chester city centre, we shouldn't have that issue being such the detraction that it is in the city. We're better than that. We're better than that. It's a very painful nettle to grasp, but the nettle has to be grasped.
We've got a responsibility, haven't we, to get this stuff right, because we live in such a wonderful place.
Well, we have, but unfortunately, you know, we also live in a city where at 5 o'clock at night time, you would feel threatened walking through the city. That can't be allowed to happen. So whoever's got the political controls to arrest that, no pun intended, and that's not the solution, really. No. But it's having a massive impact on property, because it's having a massive impact on investment. It's having a massive impact on people who want to do it. Only this morning I had an email from a client on something that we know a building is being targeted by squatters. I mean, here we go again. It's not helpful. But what COVID-19 has done is that it's actually potentially given us a palette to have the opportunity to think about these things. But not only think about these things, Lisa, but to act on them. You know, the issues on D House, I mean, you know, the big building that sits behind the amphitheatre. Well, a succession of different politically controlled councils has just ignored it for the last 20 odd years. And it's got to this stage.
Isn't it? Decades and decades.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's got to the stage now where it needs addressing. But rather than think about that as in a negative context, we should be thinking about that in a positive context. So back to the conversation about Chester. Holistically, we've got a massively rare asset. It's not unique, but it's very rare in the amphitheatre. We've got no interpretation about that. We've got no real interpretation about the history of the city. If you came here as a visitor, I think you'd be surprised at the lack of things that there are to do and the lack of joined up thinking across the historical community. There's no one telling the story. Yeah, we've got a museum, and that too has been massively affected, of course, by COVID for obvious reasons. But it's not in any sense a world-class museum. It has world-class exhibits in it, most of which are down in the basement. You know, so we've got the building blocks in the city to actually take this opportunity to have a vision, but then make it happen. So that I think is where post-COVID we need to be working out how we do that in the city. And I'm old enough and experienced enough to be able to say that without people criticising me. You know, so I would, if I wanted to give one message across this platform, it's the fact that, you know, within our city there is a wealth of experience across the built environment, architectural, event management, all sorts of things. We should be taking this opportunity to bash our heads together and come up with some very quick solutions, and then get on with it. Less talking, more action. Less talking, more action. And if you think it can't be done, it can. If I can pretty much single-handedly. I'm not taking all the credit, because I did have some help from a few key followers, and you know who they are, and for that I'm very grateful. But actually, if you can start something and you have a big enough vision, you can probably make things happen. But you just need to get off your arse and do it. Can I use the word arse on a Zoom call?
Absolutely, yeah. I like it.
Oh, don't forget my mug.
It's going to be an exciting few years if we can put some of these things into action, won't it? Thank you, Tim.
It is, and it's not. And I think the other thing is we've got to forget about the traditional way of looking at things a little bit. You know, our world. I come from a retail background, so our world is based on Zone A valuations of shops. Not anymore. It's not. That's, you can take that and throw that away. It's all about trying to put the right operators in the right space on terms that make money for everybody, and that requires proper use of the grey wobbly bit between your ears.
Good job. Yours is world class.
I'm sure it's.
It is. Thank you so much, Tim. Thanks for taking the time today. I know you're very busy, and you know, your phone's been ringing through this call, but it's, you know, it's really, really good to see you. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you in person very soon too.
Likewise, Lisa. Be good.
Thanks for taking the time.